David, just coming back to you, and back to the selection process. So you just sort of walk us through the main steps.
And we've even tried sharing my screen, so hopefully that works on the recording as well. But you know, we have a tried and tested way of doing this, and in terms of the process, hopefully you see it on the screen, we go through a process. First of all, is to just touching on what Nigel was talking about there, is educating the committee. If your selection committee, people who've been sort of put on the project to run this, don't know what the market is, what to expect of the process, we find that doesn't go well at all. So we've put quite a lot of time up front in the project, sort of getting the group who are involved in the selection, having a few software development demonstrations, talking about the challenges within the current firm, talking about the aspirational goals of the firm, as Nigel's just come, and that then helps you determine the goals and success criteria. And actually, that's then the break point to say, you know, actually, that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, because quite often these conversations start as we want to buy a new system. They don't start about why we need to buy a new system, just everything's going to be slicker and more efficient and easier. That's what everybody says about the new PMS. They don't think about, you know, why are we actually doing this project? What are we going to get out of it? How is it going to add value to our business? So we go through this process of education, identification of goals at a business level, then looking at unique things to that business. So if you're a high volume PI or high volume plot sales, you're going to need some specific modules to help you more efficient in those areas. So there's those sort of things that really play a key part. So there's a few things that really jump out that help you get your shortlist very short, very quickly. Things like, you know, multi-currency. Do you need true multi-currency? Are you just holding money? Do you need a plot sales module? Do you need a marketing module? You know, or do you just need like an events management module? There are some key things that jump out to make that list selection better. And you'll notice on our process, we've got various lines going out because, you know, lessons learned here is quite often firms will have a group of people, a selection committee who are responsible, but actually they are not the board or the equity group. And we've had a couple of projects where the selection committee have made a very good decision for the firm, but people in the board and equity group haven't been involved in the process, and nervous and basically put a block on a project. So we've developed our process now. So we have very clear, these are the stages of the project, so everyone understands that from the off. And we have key points where the selection committee is making a recommendation to the board, and the board are saying, okay, we got you, we're up to date with it, we're buying into this. And equally, we've had a situation where equity partners challenging for times, they're challenged for time, and you know, they sometimes don't make themselves available for the information gathering, don't make themselves available for the presentations or the conversations with suppliers. And then it comes to the board meeting to make the final investment decision, and they said, my secretary would like the blue one, but you're going to buy the white one. And those are the conversations really can mess up that selection process in a major way. So it's really important that you have a framework to say who is going to make the decisions, what level of decision can they make, and when do the board or the equity group ratify those decisions, and don't save that ratification up to the end, because even the most powerful IT director, ops director, or managing partner at some point needs to get the equity group into this decision. That's why I take it right back to the beginning of this webinar. It is a property decision. The firm is committing to something for 10 to 15 years. It's not a decision you can just make and brush under the carpet if it doesn't go well in a year and get a different solution. And that's why, you know, there's such important projects, and why your governance has got to be absolutely spot on for that decision-making process.
Thanks, David. Kevin, from your long experience, which steps of those that David's just run through offer the sort of greatest risk of a misstep?
I think rather kind of than looking at those individual steps, we saw the arrows, you know, coming in and out of those steps, and David talked about, you know, the sort of board responsibilities, and he talked about the committee responsibilities. But beyond that, you've got the staff across the firm as a whole. And looping back really to what Nigel said about buy-in, I think it's so important to get to get the communication and the involvement right. I think a big misstep is often where there's a lack of involvement of the right staff to achieve that buy-in. And I think often a selection committee goes a long way to solving that problem. But we obviously don't want to have a situation where you're making a decision by committee, where that committee is the whole firm. Everybody can't be involved, particularly in the final selection of the chosen system. But that said, you do need to involve as many staff as you can in the process. Staff need to be given a chance to give their views, whether that's what they think the requirements are, or what they think a system needs to be able to do, what they might like and not like about particular systems. So that's really important. And if they can't do that themselves, then they need to be represented by someone who can do that on their behalf. And that may well be the committee, but that committee needs to make sure that they do take those views on board. And that works, across the firm in different ways. You need to represent all of the different, departments or practice areas within a firm, but you need to also represent staff at all levels. So, whether that's management, equity partners, fee earners, secretaries, and of course there'll be operational staff as well, marketing staff who want to look at the CRM aspects of the system, for example. So involving all of those staff in some way and making sure they're represented is so important to getting that final buy-in and making sure that the system will be utilized by everyone once it goes in, once it's implemented.
So also what we found is, don't be afraid to group types of people together who do similar types of work. Very often firms will try to pigeonhole and go, we must do it on a departmental basis. But actually, if you look at the needs of a corporate department and a family department, say, they're actually quite similar in how they operate in many ways. Yes, there's some specific form software that they use, which is different, but actually in terms of things, it's just the management of key dates and template letters. So you'll find there's actually very close user requirements or system requirements across the vertical. So it doesn't have to be down the line departments. User groups is just as important.
Okay, thanks, David. Nigel, at the end of the day, selection committee, they have to make a decision on the system. Should a well-run formal process make that decision fairly obvious, or can it be a little bit more nuanced or complicated than that?
I think the simple answer to that is in the majority of cases, then the answer is yes. As we've mentioned a couple of times, I touched on the process that David went through. I think so long as we've been very clear about the reasons why we move into a new system and not simply trying to make the best of the current one, I think so long as we've done a thorough requirements gathering process and really uncovered the key functionality that's needed, then the process and the decision making around that should be fairly clear by the time the end of the process comes around. I think it's not to say there aren't some nuances that will arrive. So I think a really good example of that is when you will look at a system that doesn't necessarily tick all the boxes functionality wise, but you feel the vendor, you have a really good relationship, they seem very willing to work with the firm on an ongoing basis to develop that functionality over time. So you may feel as though the strong relationship actually compensates for some of the lacking functionality in some areas. But I think even then, those situations, it's important to take those pros and cons away and kind of look at them analytically and, with a clear head say, well, let's look back at the reasons why we're putting this new system in place. Do we feel the vendor strategically will work with us as a partner to develop the functionality that we need? Where do they sit from a service and support viewpoint? So there can be nuances that arise, but I think it's still quite important to take a step back, look at things holistically, just to make sure that the right decision is come to, and you're leading with your head rather than your heart.
Thanks, Nigel. David, one final one for you. If you were going to offer just one piece of sage advice to a firm contemplating a PMS change, what would it be?
I think it's following Nigel. You've got to follow your head, not the heart. You've got to have a clear idea of what it's going to do for your business. You know, it's not enough just to take a salesman's description of what the system could do. You've got to marry that back to what do we need to do as a firm. And I would say, you know, of course, I would say this is engaging somebody else who's done this before to help guide you through the process is very valuable. And you know, there's some consultants who will come and make a meal of it and sort of like dictate the project. You want to find a consultancy who will support, nurture, and essentially give you a process that you can run yourselves with their support rather than driving it. You know, there's good approach on that. But I think the thing is as well is if you have got one of the viable products, I'd question why that product hasn't worked for you. Because if you have got a viable product and you're complaining that people can't use it because they don't know how to use it, actually the chances are that is an issue with your training rather than the product itself. So I think that's the first thing to do is to look at where you really are and what the problems are, where you really want to be and what you want to address, and then do an analysis, a gap analysis of those two things, because that will help you decide whether you really do need to go to market or not. And equally, external help can help you frame a reinstallation just as easily as they can help you select software.
Thank you, everyone. That's all for this time. Please join us next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.